All right. So if you want to pull out a different color so you can make notes to yourself, that is totally up to you. But I wanted to start off by looking at, like I said, actual student work. So we're going to look at 3 different students' work on this. We're going to talk about what they did well, what they maybe could have changed or improved on. All right, so the first student's work that we're going to look at is up on the board. Go ahead and take a minute to try to read through what they wrote. All right, so for part A, the student said yes, because the general direction of the spread on the scatter plot is positive, supporting the positive linear correlation between number of semesters needed and starting salary. The newspaper states that as the number of semesters needed increases, the starting salary increases, which is not true of every point on the scatter plot, but is true of the overall positive trend. What do you guys think about that? It's a good answer. I think they hit all the major points they needed to there. One of the things that I want to make sure that you definitely do on questions like this, the question says, does the scatter plot support the newspaper report? You've got to have a yes or a no in there somewhere. Just analyzing that scatter plot would not be enough. So please make sure that on some kind of yes-no question, you actually answer the yes-no part and then support it with your observations from that scatter plot. So yeah, I agree. This is a great answer to this one. Let's go down and look at their answer to part B. That is scrolling really strange. There we go. Okay. Identify the slope of the least squares regression line and interpret the slope in context. So they have y hat equals ax plus b. We normally do it, a plus bx. Did they identify the slope correctly as 1994 or 1594? I can't read it. 5, okay. This slope means that for every 1 semester increase, the starting salary increases by 1.1594 thousands of euros. I see some good things. I see some not so great things. What do you guys see? Did they identify the slope correctly?
Yeah.
So for every 1 semester increase, let's go and look at this. Yeah, so here where it says semester is 1.1594. Yeah. Yep. The constant would be the y-intercept part, the 34. So they identified the slope. Did they get the meaning of the slope correct?
Yeah.
There's one thing that I didn't see in this answer that I really wanted to see. Max. They never say it's a prediction. The way the student wrote it, this seems to indicate to me that it is a guaranteed increase in your starting salary. That's not necessarily true. The model predicts an increase, but that doesn't guarantee an increase. So that idea right there where you have to make sure to hit on predicted, this is called non-deterministic language, and it's something that they look for. Deterministic language is if this, then this. Kind of cause and effect style language. And if you don't have something in there saying like, nah, this is what we predict, or this is on average what we would tend to see, something in there that lets people know that this isn't a guarantee. You need to have some kind of non-deterministic language in there. So that word predicted absolutely encapsulates that. Anytime we're talking about the least squares regression line, you want to make sure to indicate that this is typical or expected or predicted, but not a guarantee there. So because of that piece on part B, they only ended up with a partially correct here because they didn't have that important non-deterministic language. So the way this particular test was scored, the front side was like one whole section together. So they got the first part all the way correct. The second part they got almost all the way correct, but they left out that really key piece of information. So they got it partially correct on the front here. All right, flipping it over on the back. It got more challenging on the back, didn't it? Yeah. This was, by the way, this was question number 6 off the AP exam. And on the free response questions, question 6 historically is the one that they throw in as like a challenge question. So it'll have pieces that you can absolutely do because of what you've done, but then they're going to kind of push you a little bit on that. They don't expect every student to get every piece of this one. This is where you can see the people, like this separates the 4s from the 5s. That's generally what happens with question 6. All right, so they had that graph again, but now it's separated out by major. We've got our business majors, physics majors, chemistry majors. Based on the people in the sample, describe the association between starting salary and number of semesters for just the business majors. Students said that there was a strong negative linear relationship between starting salary and number of semesters with the business majors. As the number of semesters increases, there's a clear decrease in the starting salaries of the business majors. What do you think? They left out what? They left out any unusual features. Were there any unusual features on our business majors? Business was these guys down here, right? Not really. They did not, at least the AP reader that read this, did not take off any points for leaving out unusual features, but I would definitely want to make sure to talk about that. Like there were no surprising or unusual features, unusual points when looking at just the business majors there. They hit the 3 most important parts as we're looking at those features since there weren't any unusual features. They hit direction, they hit strength, and they hit overall form. They got strong, negative, linear relationship. They also did one other thing that I really, really like. They did their duffs, direction, unusual, well, they didn't hit unusual features, but form, strength. What else did they do that's great? They had context in there. Starting salary, number of semesters. This last sentence, I agree with it. I would just say that there's a clear trend that there's a decrease. When you look at those points, this guy right here is higher than the one there, but overall we see this overall trend of a decrease. I think that's a pretty strong answer there. Pretty strong answer. What about part D? Based on the people in the sample, compare the median starting salaries for the 3 majors. We haven't really talked about finding median from a scatter plot. What do you know about medians, though? How do you find the median? Cross them out and find the middle. So they said the median starting salary for business majors is the lowest of the 3 at about 38,000 euros. The physics majors have the next highest median salary starting at about 47,000 euros. The chemistry majors had the highest median starting salary of about 55,000 euros. I want to go back and look at this graph. Took me a minute the first time I looked at this, trying to figure out why there were all these markings. They're trying to find the median on here using that scatter plot. So they're crossing out just like you guys were talking about. Crossing out from either end, trying to get to that middle value. And it does have to be an approximation. Do you think they did a reasonable job approximating those medians? Yeah. Overall, what do you think of the answer? Yeah. So between this one and part C up above, this was another scored section as either an E, P, or I. We said that we liked the answer here in C. They hit direction, form, strength. Part D, they did a reasonable job estimating those starting salaries, the median starting salaries. Did they use comparative language? Let's look. I've got lowest here. We've got next highest and highest. Are they making comparisons between the three majors? Yeah. They have that comparative language. They didn't just state what the median salaries were. They had comparison language in there, even if it's just low, middle, high. Did you have a question, dear?
Yeah. So you don't have to explain why chemistry is the highest, you just have to like say that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For this particular part of the question, it was just saying compare the median starting salaries, so we had to identify a reasonable estimate for those median starting salaries, and then kind of rank them. That would be our comparison here in this case. Yeah. Overall, on this section, this student got it essentially correct. Last question. Oh, where did it go? Let's see part E. Oh, there it is. I got lost. Based on the analysis conducted by the independent researcher, which is on the back side, how could the newspaper report be modified to give a better description of the relationship between the number of semesters and starting salary for the people in the sample? Said the newspaper could release a new article that retracts the statements of the old article and shows the new researcher's findings. They could state that stratifying the data based off of major would yield more accurate findings. The newspaper report could show 3 separate scatter plots with each major type and show the negative inverse relationship between number of semesters and starting salary, as well as the median starting salary for each job. I see some good things, I see some bad things. What do you guys see? Yes. We've got negative relationship, median starting salaries. What else do you see that we like? Do you think it would be helpful for people reading an article to see a breakdown like this? Yeah. Do you feel like the original newspaper report was misleading? Do you think that it should be retracted? Was it overall wrong?
Well, it's not completely wrong. It didn't say the majors had a higher starting salary. It just said the number of semesters.
I like that. So the newspaper article was just talking about, like, according to this scatter plot, according to the data that we're presenting you with, overall, the trend is that the longer you spend in school, the more semesters, the higher your median starting salary. Is that what we see unless we break it down by major? Yeah. When you break it down by major, it seems to tell a different story, but when you look at that graph that's on the front side, oh, of course they don't show me the picture here. All right, so looking at this one, overall I see this positive trend. It seems to be that the longer you spend in school, the higher your median starting salary. When you break it down by major, it seems to have more of a negative trend per major, but overall, I don't think that the newspaper necessarily needs to retract their story. So because of that really strong language on part E, where did it go? Saying that they needed to retract their story indicates that they were wrong. They weren't wrong, they just weren't telling the whole story. So maybe some clarification rather than retracting. They ended up with a partially correct on this one. So they got a partially correct on the front side because they left off that non-deterministic language, which is really, really important. They got a partially correct here for saying that the story needed to be retracted. They got essentially correct. Overall, the student got a 2 on this question. 2 out of 4. It's 4 is the highest. Yep. So a 2 out of 4 on this one. Let's go look at another student. We're going to see what we think of theirs. All right. So here's student 2. Does the scatter plot support the newspaper report about the number of semesters and starting salary? Justify your answer. Yes, because we can see a clear positive association between number of semesters and starting salary. What do you like? Yeah. Positive association, that is very clear. They do identify those variables, so they have the context in there. Absolutely. This is sufficient on part A. They didn't leave out any big ideas. Part B says the slope is 1.154. It's predicted that as the number of semesters increases by 1, the starting salary increases by, and then they change this, let's see, 1,159.40 euros. What do we think? Yeah, they converted it at the end. They were looking at, I don't even think that we can see, yeah, I can't see the units on here. That's on your page, but it's not on my version of it. So they converted it. They didn't convert it wrong. They've got the right big ideas. Did they interpret the slope correctly overall? Yes. Remember, this guy right here, so what's reported as your slope, that's the change in your y for each one in your x. Yes.
You don't have to convert.
No. No, it would have been perfectly appropriate. Now, in the context part, you would need to, thousands of euros or whatnot. Absolutely. You do not need to convert that numerical value. Did this student fix what the previous one did not? Yes. That one little word right there makes the difference between an essentially correct and a partially correct here. Let's look at their answer for the second part. So this student got essentially correct on the front side. Based on the people in the sample, describe the association between starting salary and number of semesters for the business majors. The association is negative. As the number of semesters increases, the salary decreases. What do you think? Partially, why?
Not enough content.
Not enough context. We've got semesters and salary. It might be better to say starting salary to be a little bit more precise. Definitely see something missing here, though.
Predict. No.
Predicted would be good. Kind of a big one that I'm not seeing.
They're not talking about business majors, say semesters.
Not talking about business majors. What do you see?
They didn't say how strong it was.
They didn't say how strong it was. They identified the direction. Did they talk about the form at all? So they didn't talk about the strength. They didn't talk about the form. They only talked about the direction here. I think that's probably a substantial oversight when you're trying to describe this relationship. Based on the people in the sample, compare the median starting salaries. The median salary for business majors is around 37,000 euros. The median salary for physics majors is around 48. The median salary for chemistry majors is around 54,000 euros. What do we like?
Predictions are accurate.
They've got accurate predictions. Doesn't have comparative language. They just stated reasonable estimates here. So we left off comparative language here. We left off talking about form and strength here. Yes, ma'am.
So for mine, I included, according to the graph, the median starting salary increases with the number of semesters. Would that be comparative language?
Yes, but I would probably add just a little bit more. So between the three majors, we see that, the median starting salary rises from a low of this for the business majors, then it's the physics majors with this, and finally. So yes, you have that comparative language, but then tell me kind of what that comparison is. Yep. Overall, what do you guys think? Essentially correct, partially correct, or incorrect? Partially correct on this section. So far we have an essentially correct and a partially correct. Their answer to the last part, let me see if I can fit it all up on the screen. It would be better if the newspaper report divided the distribution into 3 separate distributions so that each major is accounted for separately. In the first newspaper report, the correlation seems to be positive, but after evaluating the effect of each explanatory variable on the response variable, in the second study, we see that the associations, plural, are actually negative. What do you guys think? Yeah, they didn't straight up call the original one wrong and needing to be retracted, but they do talk about what would be better and that they should clarify further. Essentially correct, partially correct, incorrect. Essentially correct. So they got 2 essentially corrects and a partially correct. The student got a 3 on the question. So little pieces of language. I mean, really what changed it for this person versus the other is that predicted, that non-deterministic language. Last example that I want to look at. Here we go. There's a positive correlation shown between semesters in the program and starting salary, even if the correlation is not extremely strong. What do we think? Like it. We've got correlation, we've got strength. I wish I saw form in here. They do talk about those different, they do work context in, so we know what our explanatory and response variables are there. 1.1594 is the slope of the least squares regression line. It says that for every additional semester, starting salary increases by 1.1594 thousand euros on average. What do you guys think? They saved themselves right there with those parentheses. If they did not have that on average in parentheses, they would have gotten knocked down for not using non-deterministic language. They snuck it in there right at the end, essentially correct on this one. There's a moderately strong negative correlation between number of semesters in a program and starting salary for business majors. Chemistry has the highest mean starting salary, followed by physics and then business. They were actually scored essentially correct on this. I as a reader would have said, well, you didn't give me reasonable estimates, but it didn't actually say. It said compare the medians. They did compare those medians there. And last, majors that typically take longer to complete tend to come with higher starting salaries. However, taking longer than average than other peers in your major tends to lead to a lower starting salary. What do you think? This one is correct. If you look at that graph, business majors, overall, it doesn't take as long to finish that program. The longer it takes someone to finish, the lower the starting salary. That's that negative association. Chemistry majors, on average, have a higher starting salary. Their program also, on average, takes longer to complete than the business majors. Same thing over here with our chemistry majors. Sorry, I think I said chemistry in the middle. But as you look at these three groups, it takes longer to finish a degree in chemistry than it does in business, and that does come with an overall higher starting salary. But if you look at individuals in each of these programs, if it takes them longer to complete that program. Does that make sense? So yeah, I think this analysis at the end is probably the clearest to say that, like, what the newspaper said wasn't wrong. These programs that take longer to complete usually do come with a higher starting salary, but within each of those disciplines, the longer you take, the lower your starting salary is there. This student got a 4. Student got a 4 here. All right. Last thing I want to remind you guys of, if you have not yet done the total registration and paid for your AP exam, that does need to be on the horizon. You need to make sure to get in and pay for your AP exam through total registration before October 8th. So you've still got like a week and a half, 2 weeks left. You want to get it in there and do that for sure. Last but not least, I have posted the answer key. I don't know if you guys saw that. It went up last night. All the way down at the bottom of our daily page, AP Statistics Chapter 3 Test Review. The question that we just did on this, if you guys look, that confusing looking graph, that is the last question on your review. So we've kind of gone over that particular piece now. Hopefully you guys have a better idea about how to answer that. So taken together would be like the newspaper analysis question, and taken separately, that's looking major by major, like what the back side of the page was. I do have after-school office hours today. If you guys want to come and work with me, I'll be here until about 3:15. So half hour, 45 minutes after school if you want to come and study for your test tomorrow. Other than that, do you guys have any questions for me? Was it helpful to see student work samples?
Yes.
Cool. I would like to do it like this moving forward, where we do this and you guys can make notes to yourself on things that you need to refine and clarify, rather than the way we've been handling it in the past. I think it's more useful for learning overall. So, have a great one, guys.